Dear students, I welcome you on behalf of Thakur Vidya Mandir High School and Junior College for the remote teaching learning process, where our motto is let learning be a joy and teaching a pleasure.
Dear students, today let us begin with part 1 of chapter number 3, that is issue of shares, wherein today we are going to understand about classification of share capital. Let us move towards the first question, that is explain the classification of share capital. Share capital is that capital which comes from sale of equity shares and preference shares. It basically refers to the money which is invested in a company by shareholders. Share capital represents long-term source of finance for joint stock companies. Further, the proportion, that is the ratio of share of equity shares in share capital, is usually more than preference shares. Let us now understand the classification, that is types of share capital. The following flowchart explains the different types of share capital. Let us understand each one of them in parts as well as in detail. Firstly, it is authorized, nominal or registered capital, which is further divided into issued capital and unissued capital. Issued capital is further divided into subscribed capital and unsubscribed capital. Subscribed capital is further divided into called up capital, uncalled capital and reserve capital. And lastly, called up capital is divided into paid up capital and calls in arrears. Dear students, now let us understand each of this type of capital with examples in detail. To begin with, the first type of capital is authorized capital, which is also called as nominal or registered capital. Let us now understand as to what is authorized capital with the help of an example. Let us assume there is a company named ABC Company Limited, which has an authorized capital of rupees 10 lakh. Now, this capital is divided into 1 lakh equity shares, wherein the face value of each equity share is rupees 10. Thus, in this way, when we multiply the number of shares with its face value, we arrive at rupees 10 lakh as authorized capital. Now, we further need to understand as to why it is called by 3 different names. So, let us understand the same. Firstly, it is called as authorized capital because it is the maximum amount of capital for which shares can be issued by the company to shareholders. It thus means that a company cannot raise share capital beyond this amount, and which is clearly stated in Memorandum of Association. Secondly, it is called as registered capital because it is mentioned under the heading of capital clause in the Memorandum of Association, which means that this amount is decided prior to incorporation of company. Further, the company pays stamp duty on this amount at the time of incorporation, and lastly, this amount is calculated taking into consideration the present as well as the future needs of the company. Thirdly, it is also called as nominal capital because a company usually never issues the entire amount of authorized capital. Certain portion of authorized capital is issued in the beginning, and then the remaining portion may be issued in future as and when the company is in need of funds. Lastly, if the company wants to increase the amount of authorized capital, then it can do so by altering its Memorandum of Association. So, it is for this reason that it has 3 different names, that is authorized, nominal and registered capital. Let us now move towards the second type, that is issued and unissued capital. As discussed in the first type, that is authorized capital, wherein the amount was rupees 10 lakh. Now suppose the company issues shares worth rupees 4 lakh only, that is 40,000 equity shares of rupees 10 each. Then rupees 4 lakh will be called as issued capital of the company, whereas the remaining part of the authorized capital, that is rupees 6 lakh, which is divided into 60,000 equity shares of rupees 10 each, which are not issued to the general public, that will be called as unissued capital. Thus, issued capital is that part of the authorized capital which is offered to the prospective investors for subscription. It simply means those shares which the company offers to the general public for the purpose of buying. On the other hand, unissued capital refers to the remaining or the balance part of authorized capital which are not offered to the public for sale. Thus, in future, whenever the company is in need of funds, it can issue shares from the unissued capital. Let us now move towards the third type, which includes subscribed and unsubscribed capital. In our second type, the value of issued capital was rupees 4 lakh. However, it is not necessary that the public may purchase the entire amount of capital which is issued by the company. In this example, you can see that the investors have subscribed, that is purchased only rupees 3 lakhs of issued share capital, that is they have purchased only 30,000 equity shares of rupees 10 each. The remaining amount of issued capital, that is rupees 1 lakh, comprising of 10,000 equity shares of rupees 10 each, is not purchased, that is subscribed by the public. It can thus be concluded from this example that subscribed capital is that part of the issued capital which is actually subscribed, that is bought or purchased by the investors, whereas unsubscribed capital means that part of the issued capital which is not subscribed or purchased by the investors. The next type includes called up capital, uncalled capital, and reserve capital. Let us once again understand this with the help of an example. As you can see, the investors subscribed towards rupees 3 lakh of share capital divided into 30,000 equity shares of rupees 10 each. Now, usually the company does not demand full value of shares at the time of issue. It usually collects the full value of shares in installments as per its financial requirements. Thus, even if the face value of shares is rupees 10, the company collects this amount in parts. Hence, it can be seen that the company has called up only rupees 5 per share on its 30,000 equity shares, thus making the called up capital amount as rupees 1,50,000. Thus, it can be said that called up capital is that part of subscribed capital which a company has called or demanded to be paid by the shareholders. Further, it can be seen that company has not called rupees 4 per share on its 30,000 equity shares, thus making the uncalled capital amount to rupees 1,20,000. The company will be demanding this uncalled capital from its shareholders in the near future. Thus, it can be said that Uncalled capital is that part of subscribed capital which is not demanded from the shareholders. Further, it can also be seen in the example that the company has get rupees 1 per share on its 30,000 equity shares as reserve, thus making reserve capital as rupees 30,000. The company will be collecting the amount of reserve capital from its shareholders at the time of winding up of company. Thus, it can be concluded that reserve capital is that part of uncalled capital which is to be called up only at the time of winding up of company. Let us now move towards the last type, that is paid up capital and calls in arrears. As you can see, the company called up rupees 1,50,000. However, it received amount only from 20,000 equity shares at the rate of rupees 5 each, thus making paid up capital to rupees 1 lakh. It can thus be said that paid up capital is the total amount of money which is actually paid up by the shareholders. Further, the company did not receive amount from 10,000 equity shares at the rate of rupees 5 each, thus making the unpaid capital or calls in arrears to be rupees 50,000. Thus, it can be said that calls in arrears refers to that amount of money which is not paid up by the shareholders. Calls in arrears is also referred to as unpaid capital. So with this, dear students, we have completed types of share capital, or you can say classification of share capital. The first type is authorized, nominal or registered capital. The second one is issued and unissued capital. The third one is subscribed and unsubscribed capital. The fourth one is called up capital, uncalled capital and reserve capital. And lastly, the fifth one is paid up capital and calls in arrears.
Thank you, dear children, for your patience listening.